From the Konocti Fire Safe Council, I'm Bill Grudy, and this is Fire Talk. In this episode, Lessons from Los Angeles. When reports from the devastating Los Angeles fires started coming in back on January 7th, we at the KFSC started thinking about what could be learned from the situation down there that could help us become better prepared in the event of another massive fire in our own community. We're lucky to have two people who can be very helpful as we think about this question. Fire Chief Willie Cepeda from the Lake County Fire Protection District, and also retired Battalion Chief John Knoll, who served some 35 years in the area where these fires burned through. He's now a member of our board. And so the story begins.
This is a brand new fire. I count multiple structures on fire here. There are two buildings right there in the foreground. If you look, there are embers blowing in the opposite direction. Go ahead, widen out just a little bit. They're getting water.
Here's the timeline. The Palisades fire breaks out at 10:20 in the morning, and later that evening at 6:18, the Eaton fire breaks out in Altadena. It's fast-moving, pushed along by hurricane-strength Santa Ana winds. At this point, a call goes out for help to Willie Cepeda at the Lake County Fire Protection District and his colleagues all across the state.
On the onset of the Palisades and the Eaton fire, there was a request for 150 fire engines immediate need. As those requests go out, those are filled by local governments and municipalities, and then OES has a fleet of Type 1s, 3s, and 6s. So those that are issued out, so an OES engine is issued to a county entity, and the agreement is that you will staff that 24/7 for that response. So you have the OES engines that belong to state OES, fire rescue, but they're staffed with local government employees.
Take us back to the time when you got the alert on this fire and the process of your getting your act together and then getting, I presume, on the road, and what did you take down? And tell me a little bit about the journey that you took.
Yeah, so I got the call about 1 o'clock to kind of be prepared that, they'll be calling for the OES engine out of South Lake, and they may be looking for some overhead. Got another update about 4 o'clock, and said, hey, we're still processing the orders. And then I got a call at about 6 o'clock from Ryan Wakefield. He's our Region 2 Assistant OES Fire Chief, and said, hey, we're looking for a strike team leader. Are you available? And I said, you bet. And it's like, okay, you're going to be going to the Eaton fire, and you'll rendezvous with your strike team. You decide where you're going to meet up. You have 3 engines from San Francisco, 1 from Marin County, and 1 from Stanislaus County.
Were you taking anybody else from Lake County, or just
No.
you? So you were alone.
Yeah.
And were you in an engine?
No, I take my utility.
Okay.
It's fully equipped as the task force or strike team leader.
Sure.
And so I made contact with the engine bosses from the other agencies and said probably the best, because we're going to the Eaton fire off of 5, we'll meet at Patterson at midnight. So started the journey, met up with the crew. We did a debriefing, introductory, code of conduct, safety factors, weather conditions. I was able to download the IAP for that day to give them an idea of what we're rolling into so that they're more prepared for that. Started our journey. We got down to the Rose Bowl about 4 o'clock, a little bit after 4. We checked in. Things were still ramping up. We checked in, and then within about an hour, we got a phone call and said, you're going to Division Tango, which is up off of Lincoln Avenue, and to meet up at the Station 12, which is one of the oldest LA County fire stations. Once we got there, we had already had the day's IAP of what that was, and our focus that day was really just to extinguish fires and secure areas around structures that had not burned yet. The other part was to look for casualties in burned vehicles and those homes. I marked those, secure those areas, and then call in the LE to support that. So getting down to the Rose Bowl, I've been through a lot of fires, seen a lot of devastation. Rolling into the Eaton fire was just, you had complete city blocks that were gone, nothing but chimneys. But yeah, you would have in the middle of that a home that wasn't damaged at all. So really kind of bizarre fire behavior down there.
What was your reaction to the overall scene? What, just on a gut level, when you got down there, what were your first thoughts?
They were really trying to secure the area to keep the evacuees out of there and to keep the looters out of there, and they were trying very hard to secure that. So we played a kind of a dual role of not only response and mitigation efforts, but to try to corral any looting that was going on or unessential people there. But it was one of those is that you still had homeowners that were distraught. They hadn't done a comprehensive search for casualties, for victims. That occurred over the following 5 or 6 days. They had urban search and rescue teams come in with cadaver dogs. But it was the sheer, devastation. So, the homes are very tight-knit. They're 10 to 15 foot away from one another. And being on the Valley Fire, homes are a little bit more spread out. On the Clayton Fire, the homes are a little bit more spread out. But you would have pockets of this metropolitan city just decimated.
Yeah, it seems like in some of the fires up here, just to the layperson, it seems like you have a lot more room to maneuver than you do in a situation like you do down there.
We do. When we rolled in, there were still power lines and telephone, utility poles all over. There was natural gas that was burning a lot of the structures that burned down because of valves. So there was a lot of instability. There were a lot of half-portion walls still standing, chimneys, and trees, which are, we call them widowmakers. Those things will kill you. And so, it was a real quick down and dirty safety meeting, with the crew. And then we broke up our geographical area into 1 or 2 streets, and then the marching orders were, we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. These are the safety considerations. Met in with our division periodically throughout the day. It was just so overwhelming because there was so much work to be done, and not knowing if people had evacuated. So every burned vehicle we had to do an assessment on. The homes as well as we could. One of the things that we encountered was a couple homes with basements, and you never would have expected in Altadena and Pasadena to have basements. And so there were some near misses with, firefighters falling into the basement area.
It seems to me that while you are dealing with this highly concentrated residential area, there are some things that apply up here. I think back to the Boyles Fire.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff. So just in terms of things that you observe there and things you've observed here, are there lessons just on that level that you can take?
Yeah, when you look at fire spread, they had catastrophic winds that night, but you get the ember casting coming off, and those go into the vents underneath your house or the vents on top of your house. A lot of decorative vegetation that was flammable. Not a lot of defensible spaces. So once it gets into that first house, then it looks what we call structure to structure. The radiant heat off of one like Coffey Park and like the Boyles Fire and like the Cache Fire is it got one house and then it just went through all those homes. And, when you look at perspective of a normal fire response, usually a metropolitan city will roll 3 engines for one structure. And when you look at 8,500 homes, that's 24,000 engines needed. And when you look at municipal water systems, is that every house that burns hemorrhages water. So for every house that burned, it hemorrhaged out 30, 70, maybe 100 gallons a minute. And then you get into the commercial buildings with the deluge systems. So it's hard for any water system to maintain, as well as you have hundreds of fire engines hooking up to hydrants. You have some engines that are flowing over 1,000 gallons a minute. So that was, somewhat of a stress factor for both fires, and looking at alternative water supplies and getting water tenders in there. Very well choreographed. It just, that so much devastation had heard, and there's a reflex time for resources coming in. So that fire started Tuesday. They started calling resources in. And like for us, it was a 9-hour drive, so there's no immediate need there. And we drove all night and then got put on the line. So it was about 60 hours without sleep before we got our first time off. But those are the critical parts, is to give those folks that were on the initial attack a little bit of a break.
Again, just to somebody who's not in the profession, that even though there were millions of gallons of water available, it just simply wasn't enough. And is any amount of or any kind of water system capable of handling something like that?
Not with, when you have those many homes involved and those winds, because winds were guesstimated between 60 and 80 miles an hour. There's no way to stop it. You can have a siege of fire engines, but like we've seen with our fires, like the Boyles Fire, it started on 6th Avenue, and then it went to 8th, 12th, 15th, 18th, 20, 21, is those embers So you're trying to keep ahead of that fire and still remain, because during that IA, there's a lot of times you're doing evacuation instead of fire suppression, because those people are going to die if you don't. So you had engines that weren't able to engage in firefighting because they were saving lives and getting them to a safe refuge area. So it compounds, and what we rely so much on being notified of an incident. So fire service has done a great job in providing. We have IPAWS, Integrated Public Alert Warning System. We have Reverse 911s. We have LACO Ready. We have all these things that our society relies on. And it's getting back to, making sure that you're able to take care of yourself. Is growing up, if you've seen smoke, you paid attention to it and you went the other direction. But we've gotten to a point where they rely on those alert systems, and they're good, but they should be, maybe primary for that alert that there's an event. But when that event occurs, it's really for people to find some type of information, whether it's a social media, and be careful what you read on social media. What you may have on news releases and things like that is that when that thing ramps up and you're getting warnings, it's when to listen to those and follow that information and go where you need to, because with all these fires, it's difficult to get in and do your work when you have people trying to come in and see, and you have people trying to get out. Roads are clogged up. It's just a recipe for disaster.
I mean, yeah, we've had that problem here just locally this past year. There was a fire over in Kelseyville Riviera, and people were going toward the fire to look at it and view, and just messing up the traffic situation. So that traffic control is critical.
We had the same thing with the boils. We had the same thing on the Glen Haven fire. We had all the Highway 20 corridor, people watching the smoke and wanting to pull in and block in, double parking. And yeah, it's one of those things is that, everybody wants to go out and see it, but it really does hamper our response times, and it hampers our ability to get in and do what we need to do. Moreover, it restricts those people evacuating to be able to access those evacuation routes to get out.
Yeah. We were talking about the winds just a short while ago, but and the Santa Anas down there at hurricane velocity and then some were a big factor. But don't some of the same sort of conditions exist here in our mountains on the, I'm going to say, east side of the lake? My lake geography is often messed up, but over by High Valley and all of that, the winds come across and they hit those mountains and they become ferocious.
We do. So Lake County is known to have microclimates. So about 25 years ago, I worked with a gentleman, Reginald Kennedy, that was with the Eureka National Weather Service. And Lake County has microclimates. So when you look at the Sacramento, Eureka, and Monterey, they have predictions, and we fall into the Eureka. But a lot of the wind events and weather events have changed when they get to Highway 29 at Robert Louis Stevenson on Mount St. Helena. Mm-hmm. And they change at the Lake Mendocino County line and the Lake Colusa County line, because we're in a bowl. So we do get, we have a lot more wind events. We have a lot more red flag days because of low temps or high temps and low humidity. So we're starting to experience a smaller version, very small microscopic version of the Santa Ana winds. We're seeing them more effectively. And then if you look after the Valley Fire, a lot of the windshield that was up there on the treetops, those trees burned down. So there is no buffer for those winds. So the winds that used to be, say, 50 miles an hour at the ridgetop are now 50 miles an hour down in the downtown Cobb Mountain area. So these fires do change what your weather patterns are. We have those wind influences that come from the Maya Kameas. We now have what we refer to as the Konocti winds. And so one of the things that I do when I go on a strike team is I try to find somebody that has been in that area for a while and say, okay, what are the normal weather patterns? What is the fire history here? So, we have a 70-year-old map here, and fire will repeat itself. The only thing that changes usually is the weather can change, but the fuel modeling changes. So when you look at the type of fuel that we have out in Morgan Valley, the fires have gone through there, so it's a cooler fire, but it's a more rapid rate of spread. Because as it gets from the flashy grasses, which is a rapid rate, it goes to a slower rate in the brush and the treetops, but it provides more ember casting.
One thing that struck me as I was watching the stories come out of L.A. was the evacuation scene where cars were stuck on roads, and I was thinking of our own Soda Bay Road corridor, which is really our our primary area of operation for us. Are there any lessons that we can take from what was going on down there, how we can prepare, what we can tell people to do, how they should conduct themselves on the roads?
Really, it's that early evacuation, and we have those problematic areas throughout the county and throughout the United States. Is that know your means of egress. Try to pick up a neighbor, decrease the amount of vehicles. Everybody takes their own vehicle, and it congests the roads. Making sure that you have a full tank of gas, and make sure your electric vehicle is fully charged. Is to heed those warnings early, because it's a little bit different. It's 4 o'clock in the morning, your phone goes off and you have an alert. But there is so much social media out there when any fire starts, because Lake County suffers from PTSD. And when that fire starts, they all start small. And then next thing you know, it's 40, it's 100 acres, and you've lost 25 homes. Is, situational awareness. But moreover, it comes back to every property owner making sure that they've hardened their homes. So when we're out there and we're doing a structure triage, we have about 5 minutes to evaluate whether or not it can save your structure, meaning that you have a defensible space. Is it salvageable? If I commit to your home, do I take the probability of losing 25 more because I have to do a lot of work? And so as a strike team leader or that single engine boss, they have about 5 minutes to make that decision. Yeah. So it starts with hardening your home, making sure that, your ember cast proof, meaning that those the screens that are on the lower part of your house and the upper part of those vents need to be bulletproof and not fireproof.
Sure.
And then make sure that your awnings or your gutters are cleaned out. An ember can set into a gutter with some leaves and fester for days on end, and then get up underneath into the eaves, and then you end up with an attic fire and lose a structure.
So as you look at this all at the 30,000-foot level, you come back, you've had a little bit of time to reflect. What overall did you take back with you that you might not have known before?
Really, it's a lot of stuff that has been, over my 45 years of doing this and being on multiple fires. That common denominator is defensible spaces. Now, on this fire, even with the defensible spaces, it would have gone from house to house like Coffey Park. But, it gives us more ability if you have somewhat of a defensible space. Once those winds subside, is to be able to engage and save that home. But when you've got that vegetation right up against your house, that's a high probability that's not going to be salvageable. So, one of the things I took away from that is that those wind events here or there are what we're seeing here. We're not seeing the velocity of those winds, but what we do here and what we do throughout California now is pre-position resources when we have red flags. Yeah. So we bring in additional engines. And then what we've done here in Lake County in conjunction, we have a very close relationship with Yolo, Colusa, and Mendocino County. We have an auto mutual aid agreement. We pre-position resources. We do auto aid into each other's counties to support that initial attack of the fire.
What are the biggest challenges the county faces now? And what's number one in terms of our preparedness, our resilience to fire?
It comes back to defensible spaces. We have a lot of absentee property owners that aren't managing their properties. We have a lot of open area that is filled with vegetation. The other part is people not hardening their homes because, we are a disadvantaged community. It costs money to do that. I think that on behalf of OES, the fire chiefs, the sheriff's office, and the cities, they're doing everything they can, but it really comes down to individuals taking care of their own and making sure that they're fire resistant. But moreover is the shortage of personnel. Yeah. So, for my department, they last about 1 to 3 years because I can't compete with the city department in wages and benefits. So, 50% of my staff live out of the county, so it is always that recruiting and retention.
You're a professional recruiter because you're level one. I found that in business, that people would come through, and we were constantly on the lookout for quality talent out there. It strikes me too that up here there are some creative things going on. I really admire the North Shore crew. What's going on up there? Fuel reduction crew, all sorts of things like that. Are there any other innovative things that are going on that we should know about?
So the county has a what we call a CWPP, Community Wildfire Protection Plan. We have fire-wise communities. We have multiple fire-safe councils that are established. A ton of money the clerk has brought into the county. We've done a lot of work on that Soda Bay corridor and through Sunset to increase those evacuation areas so that it does provide a little bit of a defensible space to be able to evacuate. The North Shore Fire Crew, fuel reduction crew, is doing a lot of those projects with clerk. The CWPP we have, there's a component that allows you to triage what areas are going to be most beneficial with the dollars you have, and we base that on life safety, economic impact, structure loss, structure value, and then environmental impact. And so what Autumn Lancaster, my fire marshal, is able to do is that she can take a project and then she can identify, the actual scope of work. And then, moreover, the benefit of that. But the problem you have with grant funds is that you do this shaded fuel break or defensible space, but there's no money to sustain that, and it's cheaper to chemically sustain that than to manual labor do that. And then when we hire somebody, it's predominantly at prevailing wages,
Sure.
So you don't get the amount of work. And then, when you look at this fire now, you're going to have a reduction in those resources that will be working here in the county because they're going south for where more of the money's going to be at all levels, whether they're talking about tree trimmers, chipping services, debris removal, all those things are going to shift south. And then what that does is that drives the rate up for that person that's trying to get a defensible space done here in Lake County, is that there's not the resources.
How do events like the LA fire impact our ability to fight fires here and to fight fire, to assist regionally?
Well, we never go to a drawdown in the county that far away, meaning that we look at what we have, what we can send, and that's kind of why an engine came out of. So Joe Huggins, he's the fire chief for Kelseyville. There was another immediate need request for the Palisades fire. So he took a unit from Monterey, a unit from Humboldt County, and two from Humboldt, one from Monterey, and then one from Lakeport and one from Kelseyville. But we never draw down to a point where we can't provide protection for our communities. That is why we don't participate as much.
Well, Willie, I want to thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us. Great to have your insights.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
We're back, and joining us for the second part of Lessons from Los Angeles is friend of the pod, John Knoll, member of our board at the KFSC. John, great. Thanks for stopping by and for agreeing to share some of your experience, your considerable experience down there. It seems to me at first blush that the LA fires signaled a seismic change in the way that we really look at wildfires. Something much bigger than a wildfire. What's your take on what we saw down there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And having spent 35 years on Los Angeles City Fire Department, and of course working closely with all 29 of the fire departments that encompass LA County, what we saw down there, unfortunately, is what we're starting to experience more and more, and that is the transition from red flag wildfires to red flag wind-driven structure conflagrations, which is a whole new animal. And as you hear to the chiefs that were down there and the folks that were involved, they talk about the fact that, if we have a single structure fire occurring, we'll put 3 or 4 fire engines on it to control that structure fire because it is such a different animal. And certainly the numbers don't work when you have hundreds or thousands of homes involved simultaneously. The math doesn't work. And what LA reminded us of is even in Southern California, where you have by far the most number of on-duty firefighters available for initial attack, if Mother Nature is in an uproar, there's virtually nothing you can do, and no one has the capability to put enough resources on scene, initial action, to control something of that magnitude.
Now, we've seen things that are similar in terms of issues with population density here, certainly not on the scale. But what sort of lessons can a firefighter or crew or the county take up here?
Yeah, the lesson is, and of course we had the same situation up here with the Boyles fire, and what we're seeing is these red flag weather events have gone to another level, and it's a level called PDS, which is, of course, one of the government's famous acronyms for a particularly dangerous situation. PDS was coined for hurricane and tornado events, and what we've realized in about the last 5 years is all of a sudden we're getting PDS, red flag events occurring in the wildland and within the structure fire conflagrations. And when the winds get to those hurricane speeds, there's little we can do. And in fact, at that point, and especially when the winds literally blow your helicopters and fixed wing air tankers out of the sky, the firefighters are doing everything they can to survive themselves and get as many people out of the way until the winds settle down sufficiently that they can actually attack the fire.
So it's get out early.
Get out early. That's exactly right.
One of the things that I noticed down there were issues with the way notifications were handled, went out. What did you see just in your observations down there, and what might the comparison be, or what might be any lessons there for what we do up here?
What we've been finding in all these major events is that the government typically gets a little bit behind the curve in these events because they are incredibly busy getting resources on scene and evaluating the scene and identifying what, if any, evacuations are necessary. In the meantime, we have applications on our devices now, free applications like Watch Duty, who literally monitor initial dispatches to all wildland incidents and will notify you anytime that dispatch occurs. So it potentially puts you way ahead of the curve for notification. Although they're never going to tell you to leave, what they're going to do is provide you an overview of the incident that allows you to make an educated decision as to whether or not that incident is anywhere near you and you should be of concern and at least start monitoring what's going on there. So if you're going to wait for the government to tell you when to leave, just be prepared that it could be potentially too late.
And become tech savvy so that you know how to use these other devices.
And if you're not, make sure you know a neighbor that is. And if you know a neighbor that doesn't have those devices, it's incumbent upon us to take care of ourselves and make sure we're checking on those neighbors that they are getting the same information in a timely manner.
Is there anything that you saw down there with regard to roads? I noticed they were bulldozing cars off the roads. Anything there that we should take special notice of when we look at our Soda Bay Road corridor and the issues that we face here?
Sure, and I always remind people, go to the Konocti Fire Safe Council webpage and look at the picture on there from the Gulf fire that occurred about 5 years ago that shows the fire trucks lined up and blocking one entire lane in Soda Bay Road. And now picture yourself like they did in the Palisades, where there were so many cars that got abandoned because of choke points that the first thing the fire bulldozers had to do was push the cars out of the way in order to get firefighting resources in there, which is why we constantly tell people, don't wait, evacuate. And if you can, what we want to do is make sure, most of us have multiple cars, and that's inappropriate to load up all your cars and go. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to be prepared ahead of the event. You want to check with your neighbors, and ideally you would fill every seat in your car so that we reduce the number of vehicles on the road during an evacuation.
What are the long-term implications, do you think, of these large fires and the prolonged fire season? I think back to right after the Clayton fire when I was talking with Chief Cepeda, and he was the first to alert me to the idea that we're now in pretty much a perpetual fire season.
We are, and that's exactly what we saw in Los Angeles. Historically, we would have never expected to be in the largest, most disastrous wildfire / structure conflagration in January. that's unheard of. And that's what the change is, and that's what the climate change is occurring up here. And of course, we have our own microclimate that does the same thing cyclically. So we can expect more of that to occur. So we need to be better prepared. We need to be more proactive, and we need to recognize that there is some predictability in this, and the predictability are the red flag events that are predicted and put out by the National Weather Service days in advance. And when those occur, we need to make the effort to get ourselves and our homes better prepared in the event something like this occurs. Because what we've known forever is anytime you have a wind event, especially of that magnitude, you have, especially in Los Angeles, they had thousands of power lines down, far more than they could have ever responded to. And that's going to occur routinely, and tragically, that's been the primary cause of most of the major fatality fires that have occurred, have been as a result of wires down. So long term, we truly need to be taking a real hard look at undergrounding our utilities and preventing the source of a majority of these fires.
Something that Chief Cepeda also brought up was that it's all well and good to get grant money and to clear along the roadsides like on Soda Bay Road, but how do we sustain that going forward, and how do we get county government and state government into the process of doing that? There seems to be a lot of money to clear the brush, but then a year later, it's back.
And as you know, that's exactly what we're running into on the Soda Bay corridor, where we were initially able through grant to provide a masticator to do the initial treatment of the roadsides. But now that constant maintenance is what's going to be so important, because, of course, what comes back immediately is not that heavy brush and trees that we trimmed, but the light, flashy grass fuels. And that's why Chief Cepeda specifically mentioned it's cheaper to chemically maintain them. And he's right. I know on our own property, each year we make more and more effort to utilize pre-emergence to chemically treat the flashy fuels.
Very, very difficult. Anything else from your notes that you think that we didn't cover that's important that we should touch on?
To me, the most important thing is it just constantly reminds us how critically important home hardening and making the transition from not just defensible space. Defensible space is the minimum. What we truly want to work towards and what Chief Maroney in Los Angeles reminded us of, is we need to start creating survivable space, because there will never be enough firefighting resources available to truly defend all of the homes that are in the wildland at this point. So we need to move towards survivable. We need to make sure that we're getting involved. If you're not familiar with Firewise, I can't encourage you enough to go to Firewise and look at both their home hardening and creating survivable space. And also with CAL FIRE, go to readyforwildfire.org and go online and develop your own wildfire action plan. Create your wildfire action plan and then get it out and review it with every red flag weather event that's predicted, and go over the list of items that we should be doing in preparation for a red flag weather event.
Thank you so much for dropping by and helping us to round out the story of lessons from L.A.
Thank you, Bill.
19 days after the fires started, a new threat.
A major rainstorm expected to sit on top of the region until Monday will all but extinguish what remains of any flame.
The hillsides are stripped of vegetation.
There's a hill in front of us that's about to come down, and then there's a hill behind us that could come down on us.
More misery and more lessons. For now, the biggest lesson seems to be that even our best firefighting and post-disaster recovery strategies are unsustainable. Being proactive is the only hope. Lessons from L.A. was produced by the Konocti Fire Safe Council. I'm Bill Grudy. Until next time.